الحمد لله الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. So after praising Allah Ta'ala, and we send salutations upon our beloved Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we ask Allah Ta'ala for dua as usual, that He gives us the beneficial knowledge, He supports us and sends blessings upon us and our families whilst we are in this quest of seeking knowledge, and He allows us to complete these courses that we start, and makes this a means of our salvation, our gaining of Allah Ta'ala's pleasure, which that's the main thing we're here to do. So it's very important, that we make sure we keep renewing our intention whilst we are in this, seeking knowledge, because we know that whilst on the quest of knowledge, because whilst the person is gaining knowledge, it's very easy to become boastful or become proud, because now I have this much knowledge, I've gained this much, I've gained this particular qualification, I'm better than this person, and things like this. We start becoming entangled into this kind of thoughts. So it's very important that we keep ourselves in check and constantly remind ourselves that we're going to only seek this knowledge that we're doing for the pleasure of Allah Ta'ala. Anyway, just to summarize what we're going to be what we're going to be doing today is we're talking about the types of filth and purification from them. So we'll talk about this, the heavy type of filth, the light type of filth, what they are, how much is excused, how to remove them, how to purify any cloth or body that it has gone on to. So we'll be talking about this today, inshallah. And we mentioned already that the amount that will be excused of each type, the najasat, which is the filth, heavy type of filth, how much of it is excused, and how much of the lighter type of filth is excused. And we'll talk about certain concepts in detail, and we'll try to make it practical, inshallah, as well. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi wahdah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala man la nabiyya ba'dah. Now we are talking about the types of filth and purification from them, for those who are following the book, page 59. So filth, najasa, is of two types. One is heavy, which we call in Arabic mughallada, the heavier type of filth, and the other is the light, the mukhaffafa, the lighter type of filth. So the reason of categorizing them as heavy and light, though they both are filth, is because of the amount that each one of them will be excused by. So the heavier type of filth, only the amount of the concave of a palm is allowed to be excused. Whereas in the lighter type of filth, a quarter of a person's body or a quarter of the cloth, which we'll talk about later a bit more in detail, will be excused. Up to that much amount can be excused, meaning that you can still pray salat with this. So the heavier type, the mughallagha, and the lighter type, the mukhaffafa. These are two types of filth. Now we're talking about the heavy filth first. The heavy filth includes the following. So the list of things, certain are obviously ones that are mentioned in the Quran. Damam masfuha, flowing blood or spilled blood, as it mentions in the book. So this is blood of human beings and all animals that have flowing blood, blood that flows. So this is all impure, and it's heavy type of filth. However, there are certain bloods, you can say, which are not classed impure. So firstly is that blood which remains in the meat and in the blood vessels of an animal that has been slaughtered in the halal way. So if you slaughter an animal in halal way, any blood that's left inside the vessels, or any blood which is left in the meat, when you cut open the meat, you may see blood pouring out a little bit. This is not impure. This blood is fine. Likewise, blood in the liver, in the spleen, you can search on Google what the spleen is for those people who don't know. It's like a part of on the left side, under the bottom of the underneath the rib cage. There's like a mushroom-shaped type of organ. So this is something which people eat as well, like liver. So if you cut that open, you will see blood pouring out of it. Likewise, the heart, these are all organs that people eat, things that people eat. So all of this, or even kidneys, I would add to it. This does not, the blood that is contained within it is not impure if it was slaughtered in a halal way, the animal. Likewise, blood that does not nullify one's wudu. So if you got a cut, or let's say you got a cut, or you grazed your skin, gashed your skin, and blood surfaced onto the wound, but it didn't flow. So that blood that has now surfaced, and is visible, that blood is not impure. That blood is fine because it doesn't break a person's wudu. Likewise, blood or any fluid of bugs, mosquitoes, roaches, and blood of fish, this is all considered to be pure. It's not impure. So these are examples of blood which will not be this heavy type of filth we're talking about here, okay? So the spilled blood, we're coming back to the book, spilled blood or flowing blood is generally of all animals that have flowing blood, well known to have flowing blood, you can say, and also the human beings. Moving on, number 2 he's mentioned is feces. So obviously the excretion, the feces of the human being as well as the animals. But which animals we're talking about here now, understand. So we're talking about land animals that are predatory or non-predatory, actually, just any land animal, okay? Land animal, so let's just discuss this, understand properly what we're talking about here. So the feces of any land animal is impure. When it comes to the urine of animals that are impermissible to eat, then again, according to our Hanafi school, as well as the saliva of the predatory animal, like dogs, etc. Yeah, so these, or even lions, cheetahs, and things like this, are all deemed to be heavy filth. So it is all mentioned in the footnote. You can see this is actually mentioned in the footnote, and the footnote seems to be quite good here. So you can see for those who have a footnote here, you can see detail there a little bit. Right, moving on, wine, khamr, which we call in Arabic, and this wine obviously is anything intoxicating, alcohol, intoxicating wine. Wine, we say not alcohol, because alcohol in terms of science is a broader family of anything which has the OH, and whereas in the Sharia concept, we're talking about wine which is impure, coming from date, grape, or anything which intoxicates, that if a person consumes, intoxicates. Whereas in terms of alcohol, when it comes to the scientific understanding of alcohols, they may not be fit for consumption, some of them. So yeah, that's the reason I think he made mentions over here wine. Moving on, the next one he says is sperm or sexual fluid, which is the same thing. Sperm, semen, sexual fluid, just giving different names for it, which is the mani, which we've talked about previously. So this is heavy filth. In fact, it's not just mani. I think he does mention in the footnote. Actually, he does mention it in the footnote very well. So anything whose exit, anything coming out of the human body which nullifies wudu or ghusl, anything nullifying wudu or ghusl, which this will be a heavy filth. So blood, pus, which flows, blood and pus, if it just surfaces, this is not impure, as we already explained. But if blood and pus or any other fluid comes out of the wound and it flows, if as soon as it flows, it is heavy filth. Likewise, urine, likewise feces, semen, even madhi, the pre-sexual fluid, likewise the wadi, which comes accompanied with urine for men, and the blood of menstruation, postnatal bleeding, nifas, dysfunctional uterine bleeding, the istihada, the vomit which comes out of a person. This is a fluid again, a vomit that comes out of the person when it's mouth full, because it nullifies wudu. So these are all examples of any fluid that comes out, or any fluid that comes out of the person's body which nullifies wudu or ghusl. This will all be under this particular category. So these are all heavy filths, which are the najasat ghalidha, heavy type. Now then we've got the lighter type of filth, which is includes the following. It says one is the urine of animals whose meat is permissible to eat. So any animal which, like, you have cows, sheep, goats, camels, deers, all these animals, chickens, if there's any urine of these animals, then those animals, I mean, the chickens won't have any, but so if urine of the other animals that we've discussed will be lighter type of impurity. Likewise, the urine of horses. So he's categorized that separately, is because obviously there is a difference of opinion regarding horses, whether you can eat them or not. There's dislike according to Imam Sab, but that's why he's mentioned it separately, just to clarify that though according to Imam Sab it's not permissible to eat the meat of the horse, but the urine of the horse will be lighter type of impurity. Then we have the third one, droppings of birds whose meat is not permissible to eat. So birds, even though it's not permissible to eat these birds, the droppings of these animals will be lighter type of filth. And these are birds like the predatory birds, eagles, falcons, hawks, and birds like this, you see. So droppings of these birds, which, because they fly, any animal which is flying, it's got flight. So it's one cause is it flies, and the other is now the concept of looking at whether it's a predatory bird or not. So if it's a predatory bird and it's flying, so because it flies, it drops a level in terms of its filth. But because it is a predatory bird, so it's going to be a it's going to be a heavier type of filth than there would be if it wasn't a predatory bird. Now, when you have non-predatory birds, then if they fly, if they fly, these predatory birds fly, non-predatory birds, sorry, if they fly, such as pigeons, sparrows, any other birds, such, then their droppings will be pure. But when it comes to, you understand, sorry, because their fly is already going to have a lightness in ruling, and on top of that, it's non-predatory, so it's even more lighter in ruling, so that's why it's pure. But when you've got birds that are non-predatory, but they do not fly. So they've only got one cause of lightening, the non-predatory. But because they don't fly, it's not a big ask to stay away from the droppings. So like chickens, ducks, geese, then that would be heavy type of filth. So that's not a lighter type of filth, even heavier type of filth. So you can see which of the two illets, we call it, which of the two causes causes the ruling of the droppings of the bird to become lightened in ruling. So you got two causes. Yeah, one is that it's predatory, non-predatory. That's what we're looking at, or whether it's flying or non-flying. So you can, I'm sure, make out that it's because of its flight. Because it flies, the ruling becomes more lightened. But when it's predatory, non-predatory, the ruling is not so much lightened. So that's why non-predatory, though it's non-predatory, chickens are, and they're halal animals, you can eat them, ducks, whatever, you can eat them, but still their droppings will be heavy. But when you've got animals that are predatory, even like falcons and eagles, but because they fly, and they could obviously, they could mid-air, they could they, or even on a tree or something, there whilst they're, when you're walking beneath the tree or on a building or whatever, and you'll be walking beneath it, or on a cable or something, they're sitting on a cable, and then you walk beneath it, and then it could be that it falls onto you, their droppings can fall onto you. So because of this, the ruling has been lightened, and that's why we talked about in the book that this is where the droppings of those birds becomes lighter type of filth. A place with discernible filth. So discernible filth is najasa mar'iyya, meaning filth that you can see once it's dried. So for example, blood, once it dries, you can still see the patch of blood, though it will oxidize and maybe become darker in color, but you can still see the filth. Whereas clear urine, which is not concentrated, urine which is more or less clear, once it dries, you won't be able to see it on most colored cloths, for example. So this is najasat غير مرئية, meaning najasa which you cannot see once it's dried. So we'll call it undiscernible filth, and the discernible filth is once it dries you can still see it, like blood or like feces or anything like that. So a place with discernible filth, how do you purify it? So he's talking about this. So simple thing to understand when purifying anything with discernible filth, with filth that you can see, is to remove the filth. Once you've removed the filth, so on it is, so a place with discernible filth on it is purified by removal of the body of filth, even if washed only once. That's the main thing. So removal is the main thing. Once you've removed the filth, however you've removed it, it could be by washing once, it could be by wiping even. So on a flat surface, a smooth surface like this laptop surface I've got here, or my wooden laminated table here, if there is filth on it, if I wipe away and all traces of that filth, the body of that filth, have all gone, then that means that surface has now become pure. I don't have to actually wash it, or in fact wash it 3 times, what people may think. So this is not needed. The only time when even, this is an exception, it says except for that which is difficult to remove. So meaning removal of the body of filth is the actual thing that a person must do. But those types of filth which leave behind a stain, and the stain is so stubborn that no matter what you do, you've tried your best, you've applied as many detergents and whatever on it even, and that stain just doesn't go. So if that stain doesn't go, then because it's difficult to remove, that stain would be fine. That's an example of me giving you what it means by except for that which it's difficult to remove. So when it's difficult to remove, you do not have to remove the body anymore because it's too difficult to remove. But generally speaking, you would be able to remove the actual body, the physical body of it. Maybe the color, the stain might stay. Maybe sometimes even the smell may stay for a while until it actually evaporates, it goes away. So the that's what the exception means. That one thing that we have to understand here, it says that what it means, it says except for that which is difficult to remove. So what do you mean by difficult to remove? The definition of difficulty when it comes to purification here like this is where you have to use anything but normal water. So if I have a stain on my jacket here, I don't need to use any sort of anything but water to remove that. If I need to use soap or detergent or bleach or even hot water for that scent, if I have to use hot water, this is all now going into difficulty because I need hot water now. So anything which is not removed by simple normal water, not even hot water, just normal water on its own, that then goes into difficulty now. So I have to use soap to remove this, that's difficulty. So now you can understand why I was talking about stain, because many times water alone on its own will not take away the stain. You will need to apply some sort of detergent or something. So this is when the body of that filth will not need to be removed. You will use water, and if you wiped it once and it removed everything, it would have been fine. But if it's still there, you have to try your best to remove it. Then you've tried your best to remove it and it's still there, the stain is, for example, there, you've tried your best. You don't have to now start to use soap on it or use hot water for it. No, you've tried your best. You've done the procedure that's coming up ahead. So that's what it means by this part here. So hopefully this is very practical for people to understand how to do this. So a place with indiscernible filth, so filth that obviously you cannot see after it dries, like urine, yeah? On it is purified by washing and squeezing the area 3 times. So you know that urine fell onto this carpet area, for example, here, but you know where it is, or urine fell onto your clothing, but you don't know where it is. It's dried now. Or maybe splashes of alcohol came onto yourself, but you can't see onto your clothing or something, and you can't see where it is because you were walking the street and maybe you kicked a can or you bumped into a can or somebody dropped some alcohol and it splashed over you, but you can't see where it is anymore. So what do? You wash the where the impurity would have been. You wash it 3 times, or if you don't know where it is at all, then you wash the whole cloth. You have to wash the whole clothing, whole area, a whole area. You have to wash it all 3 times, and each time you wash, you have to wring it. You have to squeeze out the water, and you squeeze the water hard enough. I mean all your strength, meaning you have to wring it as much as you can with all your strength, unless it's a cloth, which obviously if it's clothing which cannot be squeezed, cannot be wringed, either because you can't actually do it, it's not possible to do it, or either because the clothing will become ruined. There's no point of having that clothing anymore. You might as well throw it in a bin. So that clothing is delicate and it'll ruin because of squeezing it too hard or wringing it too much, twisting it too much and things like this. Then a person is able to do what this is next is, if the area cannot be squeezed, it cannot be wringed, you cannot be squeezed out, the water cannot be, then it is purified by washing it 3 times. So you wash it 3 times and waiting between each wash until water stops dripping. So what you do, you hang it or you make it stand somehow. Yes, you hold it with your hand, the other hand or something, and you run water on it. Okay, you've run enough water on it, then you let it hang, and you let all the water come out of it, because you can't wring it. Because you can't wring it, you can't squeeze it. What you're going to do, you're going to leave it there, and you're going to let all the water drip out. Once all the water has dripped out of it, then you wash it again. It doesn't have to dry. You don't have to bone dry it. All you have to do is make sure that the water that's dripping has come out. Because the idea is that the water which you are putting onto that cloth or that clothing or that carpet, whatever it is, that you're putting water on it, that water will carry out with it, when the water drips out and comes out, the water will carry out that impurity with it. That's the idea behind it. So it's still, the concept is still the same, which is removal of the filth. So the concept is the same. You're removing the filth. In the mar'iyah, which is discernible, you remove the physical body, which you can see, but in a non-discernible, a indiscernible filth, like urine, you can't see it, then you can just wash that area, whatever it is, you wash it 3 times, you squeeze in between each, or you wring in between each wash. And if you cannot do that, you cannot wring it, then you let it drip out all of its drops. And this is the way to purify. Now, just to give you a few more details on this practically, if a person sticks it into the washing machine, then what? So if you stick it into a washing machine that will wash the clothing for you, then you must make sure the cycle that you pick, if it's impure clothing that you're putting into it, the cycle you pick must take water 3 times. So it takes water first time, and it uses some detergent, then it washes, then it rinses it out, so it takes water again, then it washes one more time, then it rinses again. Some cycles which are longer will take water up to 3-4 times. So those cycles are fine. But if it's a rinse cycle where you're just putting in water once and maybe twice only, then in najasat, which is indiscernible, then it will not be enough, because it will need to be washed at least 3 times, water coming into it. Okay, but if it's discernible filth, then the way to see is quite simple. You put it in there, you put it into a rinse cycle even, that clothing comes out and you can no longer see any trace of any impurity on it. The smell is not there, the traces aren't there, the actual physical body is not there, the color of it, the stain of it is no longer there, then that would be fine. Okay, but the best thing always, as I always say, because when it goes into the washing machine, it will take water in, and then it's gonna spread that filth everywhere onto every clothing that is not even filthy. So the best thing always is to give it a quick rinse under the tap, where you can see the actual filth is. Rinse it out under the tap, get rid of it, then to put it into the washing machine. So that would probably be the best thing to do in terms of this practical sense. Now, if the filth is on a carpet, or the filth is on a mattress or something like this, which you cannot wring, you can't squeeze, best thing is you pour water onto it, and then you suck up the water. However you suck up the water, either you suck up the water using a hoover, suction carpet hoover, which takes up the water, carpet cleaner, or you use a traditional sponge, dry sponge. So you get the dry sponge, you have the wet one, you scrub with the wet one first time maybe, or you pour water onto the carpet or onto the mattress, and then you use the dry cloth or dry sponge to dab and suck up as much water as you can. So you sucked up as much water as you can, then you'll have to get another dry cloth or dry that particular sponge properly. So you do again the process again. So you pour water again and you suck up as much as you can. Then you pour water again and you suck up as much as you can. So that sucking out that water, however you suck out, that will inshallah, that will be the same thing as you squeezing the water, or you hanging the cloth and you're allowing the water to drip out. The idea is the same in all of this, which is to take out, remove the impurity. Hopefully this makes sense. Now, the amount of heavy filth that is excused, so remember this was the point I was mentioning earlier, for the sake of the prayer, yes, is the size of a dirham, 1 dirham amount, a silver coin, which is the amount of the concave of a palm. What that means is if you hold your palm out as normal, not too straight, but like normal, like a normal posture, and you pour water into your palm, the amount of water that will be pooled in the middle, that's the size we're looking at here, okay? So this is the concave of a palm, which is roughly 3 to 5 centimeters in diameter. So from one side to the other, 3 to 5 centimeters, depends on what size of the person's hand, right? So that's the dirham amount that he's talking about, that's excused for heavy filth, najasat ghalidha. And the amount of light filth that is excused is less than 1/4 of one's entire garment or one's entire body, a quarter of it. So this is the opinion that he's given here. Some have gone with different opinions, but this is the opinion that he has gone with over here to mention. Now, the light spray of urine is excused if the size of each dot is no larger than the head of a pin-sized needle. So it cannot be larger than that small dot of a needle. Then that is excused. But a person should make sure that when urinating, they are taking, especially for men, taking extra caution to make sure there's no splashback, because obviously there is mention in the hadith of punishment because of this. Moving on, the following situations are examples of filth not transferring from one area to another. Meaning, now we will talk about those non-transfer. So some people get worried sometimes that there was an area like a carpet that was filthy, or the floor that was filthy. Did that moisture, or did that filth transfer onto my foot when I stepped on it, for example? So that's what it's in essence talking about here. So the moisture, the first one is the moisture that appears on a dry, pure garment, after being wrapped in a damp, impure garment. That would not drip if squeezed, is not deemed impure. So if you've got a impure garment, and if you squeeze the impure garment, that impurity would not squeeze out, it wouldn't come out. So the moisture that would appear on the dry cloth, like my jacket here, for example, if I was to put my jacket onto this impure garment that is damp, if I put it onto there, and then when I take it out, I can feel a little bit of dampness on my cloth, on my dry cloth. That is not impure, because the impurity from the other cloth that was there, that impurity, if it was squeezed, it would not be able to be dripping out. It would not be able to even drip one drop out. So that's why the impurity or the dry dampness that's on the other cloth is not enough. It's too small. It's an insignificant amount. So that's excused, it's saying. Then next one is a wet, clean foot. So you got a wet foot. You just did wudu, for example, and you've come out, from where you've done wudu, and your foot is wet, but it's clean as well. That steps on impure ground. So you stepped onto the ground which is impure, without any trace, though this is important, that no trace of that impurity, of the filth, appeared onto the foot. So you looked at the foot, at the bottom of the foot, there's no trace of any filth on your foot. That does not, that won't make your foot impure. Just because you stepped on that filth, because you cannot see anything that's come onto you, that it does not make your foot impure. So if there was maybe some urine there, and you stepped on that carpet which had urine on it, and your foot was already wet, it will not make your foot impure. The reason, on concept-wise, unless obviously there are the traces of urine onto your foot. So if you can smell the urine on your foot, that's a trace of urine on your foot. Or you can see, let's say you stepped on some feces, defecation or something, and you stepped on that, and you can see it clearly on you. It's brown, it's on you. So then that's obviously going to be impure. But when you're talking about without any traces, there's nothing to say that, or nothing to suggest that on your foot the impurity has transferred onto your foot. The reason, like I said before, the reason I was mentioning is because your foot was already wet. When your foot was already wet, what would happen is that the wetness of your foot would transfer onto the carpet. Not that the filth will transfer onto your foot, because your foot is already wet. Had your foot been dry, and then you stepped on the wet impurity, then clearly when you lift it up, you can see and you can feel the wetness on your dry foot, because your foot would kind of soak up or suck up a little bit of that moisture. But once your foot is wet already, then it's not going to allow the wetness won't allow that filth to transfer onto your foot. That's the concept here. and any amount there is going to be insignificant unless there you can see the traces, or you can smell the traces or something like that. Then obviously the foot will become impure. Moving on to the next one, a damp pure garment that is placed in impure ground. So you've got a damp pure garment. You've got pure garment that is damp. Maybe you just taken out the washing and you're now hanging the washing onto the line, and it falls onto the ground, which is impure. So now that cloth or that clothing that has fallen onto the ground, without any trace of filth appearing onto, when you lift it up, there's no trace of the filth on that garment, then it won't be deemed impure. It will be still fine. You can still understand the same concept because it's damp, it's pure cloth, and there's no actual impurity that's come onto, any traces of impurity come onto your cloth, onto your clothing. So this is again excuse, or this is not any transfer happening here. Moving on to the next one, the body of one who sleeps in a dry, impure garment. So you slept in a nightgown, night wear, your pajamas, whatever it is, and those pajamas were impure actually, but it was dry impurity. Now you slept in that clothing, which becomes wet from sweat because you were sweating at night. That the body became wet. So you're not going to assume that the impurity, the dry impurity that was on your nightwear, that then became moist and transferred onto your cloth, onto your body, sorry. You're not going to assume that it's fine because there are no traces. Again, without any traces of filth appearing on the body, is not deemed impure. This is not deemed impure because there's no trace of impurity on your body. If there was traces of impurity on your body now, you can maybe feel stickiness or whatever it is, then this will mean that the body of that part of your body is impure. You're going to have to clean that. You don't have to take a ghusl, obviously. You just have to wash that area where you see the filth to remove that filth again. Moving on, an area, whether body, garment, or otherwise, or anything else, okay, with filth on it, may be cleansed or may be cleaned by water. So you clean it with water, even if used musta'mal water. So used water because it's pure. So used water because it's pure, but it's not a purifier of the hukmi najasa, which is the ghusl or wudu. So the used water, we're talking about musta'mal water, which has been used during, for example, used for wudu or used for ghusl. And that water that was used for wudu was gathered into a pot somewhere, then that water is still pure because there's nothing impure gone into that water. The only thing is that water will not be allowed to be used for wudu again or for ghusl again, because that water has already been used once. It's already been used once for attaining wudu or for attaining ghusl with. So that water is called musta'mal water. But that water, because it's pure, there's no impurity that's gone into it. That water can be used to clean this filth off with, because the point is removal. Remember, removal of the filth. So if there was filth on some pottery, something like this, or on a plate or something like that, or a glass, and a person used that musta'mal water, used water to remove the filth, then the glass, whatever it is, will become pure. So that's that, as well as any liquid that by its nature removes. So any liquid which removes filth, okay, any such liquid can be used when you're trying to remove, such as rose water or vinegar, because the viscosity of it, the thickness of it, basically runniness of this rose water as well as vinegar is not so thick. The viscosity is more or less similar to water. But if you use, for example, oil, the oil will not be able to remove because it's too thick, the viscosity of it. So this is what this is talking about. I'm just going to finish these few points off. Then we'll end today's session. So the next point here he's mentioning is complete chemical transformation, which we call a istihala, a metamorphosis, a complete chemical transformation, is a means of purification of filth itself, such as feces turning into salt or ash. So if feces was placed into salt, the salt obviously, because of the sodium chloride and everything, it will turn the whatever it is into it, to the extent that even turns whole corpses into what? Into salt, or it just over time it will disintegrate the body of that filth or the feces or whatever it is. Or if it turns into ash, so you burn it, you burn and it turns into ash. So no longer, because it's now changed completely, complete metamorphosis has taken place, so it will no longer be impure. It's going to deem it to be pure now. Now, a leather sock, which you call the khuf, or the like, such as a sandal, a leather sandal or something, right, may be purified by scraping or rubbing the affected area on the ground with dirt or on the grass or something like that, right? If the filth on it had a solid body, meaning if you stepped on something, like you stepped on on poo, on feces of an animal, something like that, and you just scraped your shoe, as long as it doesn't have grooves and things on it, which then obviously means that there is filth stuck in the grooves, then you're gonna have to remove the filth from those grooves as well. But if it was a flat shoe, something which like the hoof, and you stepped on something and you wiped it away and all of it's gone, the traces of that impurity have gone, then it will deem it to be pure. You don't have to wash. So washing in this case is not necessary. Next one, a sword of the like, or the like of the sword. Obviously the idea of the sword is that it's non-porous surface. So anything which is non-porous, so you've got plastics, you've got vinyl, or anything like this, that a sword or the like may be purified by wiping its surface. So you get wipes and you just wipe the surface and you've removed the impurity. That can also purify it. You don't have to actually wash it with water. Okay, so we will leave it there today. Inshallah, we will continue next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So now just to summarize what we have done today. So we started off with the types of filth. So the two types of filth. One is the heavier type, the other is the lighter type. Then we talked about the heavier type of filth, namely being spilled blood or flowing blood, feces, anything intoxicating like wine, and also sperm, sexual fluid, meaning semen. So these are all heavy types of filth, or I explained at that time as well that anything which exits the body that necessitates wudu or ghusl will all fall under the same category of heavy filth. Then we have the lighter type of filth, which is the urine of animals that are edible, including horses, and also then the droppings of birds whose meat is not permissible to eat. Because if its meat is permissible to eat, and they are birds that fly, then their droppings will be pure. And if they are birds that don't fly, then their droppings will be a heavier type of impurity. So that's that. Then the way to the concept we understood here, that the way to purify any cloth or any place, anything that that the impurity, the filth, has come onto, whether it's the heavier type or lighter type of impurity, the way to purify that body or that cloth or something is by removing that impurity. And we talked about whether it's a discernible or indiscernible. If it's discernible, then by removing simply the physical body will be fine, will make it pure. And indiscernible, you wash 3 times and you squeeze in between each time. Now, if a person has washed 3 times and you can still see that there is filth there, not indiscernible, obviously indiscernible, then you would have to carry on washing. So that's also the consequence of the discernible filth, where we said that the removal is the key. So even if washed once, but that also means that even if washed 3 times and it's not gone yet and you can still see it, then you have to carry on washing. You may have to carry on washing 4 or 5 times. Then maybe the fifth time is now gone. Then that would be enough. So the point in discernible is to remove completely. Indiscernible, wash 3 times, squeezing in between each time. And I explained details there as well. Then lastly, we went through the amount which is excused. So one is the heavier filth is the concave of the palm, and the lighter filth is a quarter of the body or quarter of the cloth, the entire cloth. And these were the main parts. We went through certain other concepts that are not too important. I think everything else was fine.